Hey guys, I'd like to welcome you to this episode of the Advisory Board podcast. And we've got my special guest today is Daniel Dixon. He's the CEO of Service Moxie, SendJim. You probably know SendJim. And he's a rocket engineer, family guy, got two kids, been in the Air Force for 5 years, been in strategic advisory consulting, and then realized he would never become wealthy being a W-2 employee and wanted to get into entrepreneurship, started carpet cleaning, right? Daniel, wasn't that what you got into at first?
Yeah, started in carpet cleaning and then went into concrete, like epoxy coating. So yeah.
That's awesome. And now, as of 2019, the CEO of Service Moxie SendJim, which is an awesome tool, something that we're working on integration with right now because it's a powerful platform to be able to tie into what we do here as a client tether. But Daniel, tell us a little bit more about you and about yourself, your experience in this space, and then we'll jump into the topic, which is how do we get start making an impact using mixed media engagement on lead engagement, retention, all sorts of different aspects of your business.
Yeah. So I'd like to start by saying, yes, I am a family man. My wife and children are right up there at the top of the priority list for me. So I just knew, like, being a W-2 employee, like you talked about, like we were trading time for money. And I realized that pretty early on that, hey, I'm not going to kill myself to make a bunch of money. I'm going to try this cool thing over here called entrepreneurship, which at the time seemed a lot easier than it does today. But that's every business owner's realization probably at some point. Yeah, so I never really intended on being a CEO of a company or being the CEO of a software company, but it kind of just happened. So I was doing strategy consulting in corporate America, and I really wanted to go out on my own and start a business. My family had a carpet cleaning business out in California. I lived in Nashville at the time. I still do. And they had done this for 40 something years. And so my parents really wanted me to go to college. So I went to college. The Air Force gave me a scholarship, so they paid for my college. It was amazing. And then I got out and I realized, like, the corporate America was like not what my parents thought. Like they ran this small business and were always like, go to college, get a nice office job, do all these things, right? And I was like, wow, this is like not what I thought. And I wish I was like going back and like working in the family business and buying that. But I didn't want to go back to California. So like I had this conundrum and I'm like, well, I'm going to start a business. And the first thing I was like, I'm going to start a business that I know something about. That seems wise. So I started carpet cleaning, and then realized, hey, there's some other really cool businesses out there. I started networking. I met with these guys that bought and sold 50 probably businesses. Like they were kind of like private equity guys that really focus in home service. I got connected with one of them and he's like, hey, I'm buying this cool software company, but I really don't know anything about software. It's like, I know how to run these kind of businesses, but I don't know a thing about software. And he's like, your background, you know, like about software and you're an engineer and you've managed software development projects. And he's like, but you also really understand the service business and you understand like the blue collar entrepreneur, and you know, like what the grind is like every day and what these guys struggle with and what they like and don't like. And he's like, I think you're like the perfect person to lead this business. And so talked with the family. I was like, prayed about it and realized, you know what, I'm going to take this leap. And so we did that back in 2019, and the rest is history. The carpet cleaning business is in the process of being sold, and we're all in on this software journey.
That's awesome. Well, and if you don't mind, maybe could you give us a real quick synopsis of Service Moxie? Because what I want everyone to know here is there's a reason Daniel's on this call, right? These guys are experts in a couple of things, but give us a quick overview of what Service Moxie does and SendJim specifically, which is kind of the main topic of what we're discussing.
So SendJim was the product that first started, was founded by our co-founders. And then it's a sales and marketing automation tool. We'll get a little bit more into that. And then they thought, hey, we have all these customers. We have thousands of customers that use our product. And sales and marketing is one thing we help them with. But the other thing we kept hearing about was employee motivation and employee retention and how do you attract blue collar employees. So they developed a product to try to help with that called Automate Motivate. And they said, well, now we've got two products and our company name SendJim doesn't make sense because we have this other product, and people were super confused. So we just added another name into the mix and said, well, Service Moxie is going to be this parent company and it's going to own both products. So that's what Service Moxie is. Our main product is SendJim, like I said, sales and marketing. And we really focus on building, helping you build a relationship with your customer and really maximizing the value of your customer list. So here in the service industry, we spend so much money on customer acquisition. And whether it's through Google or Facebook or whatever your business does, you spend all this money on customer acquisition to sell them something the first time. And then you really don't do anything with this massively valuable asset that you paid a ton of money to acquire, right? How many customers do you guys have in a particular business? And I'll say, oh, I have 2,000 customers. I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing to like leverage that customer list? Nothing, right? They're still using the same tactics to grow their business that they did when they first started, which was, I just need another customer. I need another customer. And that continues for so long. And then they really plateau because they say, well, I can't onboard customers fast enough, or I don't have the budget for that. So, we help really automate the growth beyond that.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect, thanks for that description, because it leads in perfectly to the first topic I want to discuss with you, which is seasonality right now, right? Like this is the time where, and as you described, most home service businesses or other service oriented businesses, they tend to overlook their most valuable asset. They spent years, they don't think of it this way sometimes, but you guys spend years building up this list of contacts of people that at some point raised their hand and said, I want someone to fill in the blank service, right? I want someone to groom my dog. I want someone to paint my house. I want someone to fix my roof or my windows or whatever. Those needs don't just disappear, right? Our homes are not self-healing yet. Maybe 100 years from now they will be, and put a lot of people out of work. But until that comes, these issues persist, and then these home service companies don't realize that they're sitting on a gold mine of leads that they're not engaging. Now, this time of year, the general traffic starts to decline a little bit across the industries. I've got great, friends and contacts at, Thumbtack, Angie, networks, like the big lead providers in the industry. And they've all said the same thing, like, yep, this time of year leads start to decline a little bit. So it's the perfect time to start re-engaging the assets that you've got. How do you think these guys can start taking advantage of that list that you were just describing? Like, what are some good tactics this time of year or any time of year there's a lull in their sales or revenue or bookings? What do you recommend?
Yeah. So the first thing, it depends on your service, right? And if it's an emergency-based service or a nice to have service, but we encourage people with like the nice to have services, like they're really busy during their busy times, right? And then it comes to a slow period. And what we encourage is like, hey, can you can you charge premium pricing when you're busy because you're booked out so far? And then people that like balk at the price or they're price sensitive say, well, you know what? We actually offer a really good special during this time of year. So if you can wait till that time, like what we'll do is we can just put you on the calendar right now, and they start pre-booking way out. Right. So it's like when their slow time comes, they've already got like a 25% of their schedule full. And it's not like, whoa, what am I going to do for work, in this slow time? So that's one thing. But also just engaging your customer throughout the year and really engaging them in the slow time. So a lot of people will send an email blast, once a year during their slow time, and it's effective, but it's not super effective because they haven't heard from you all year. You don't really have a relationship. It's really just like, a quick, like, hey, I'm here, like, let's do a transaction because I need your help type of thing. Whereas like if you build a relationship all year and then you reach out to them, with a postcard or a handwritten letter or a voicemail in combination with an email, you can really take advantage of that relationship that you have with them. And you could, I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of tactics that go with that, but there's, that relationship marketing throughout the year can really pay dividends in your slow time.
Yeah. In fact, let's put it into terms everyone gets, right? Because we've all got that friend or old college buddy or old neighbor or that person that when they reach out to you, they just want something.
Exactly.
They want somewhere to bunk, or they want to come over for a meal, and frankly, most of us, we don't care. Like, I just like to see them, so it doesn't matter. But it's over time you realize, like, oh, you're just calling me because you need something. Can I take that call right now? But as a provider, as a business, you don't want that reputation. You want to be someone who's staying in front of them, providing them value, engaging over time, like you're describing, Daniel, nurturing them throughout the season, throughout the year. If it's a big ticket item that only happens once every 10 to 15 years, maybe you nurture them for a couple of years. After, if they don't buy from you or after the sale. We'll come back to that. But for lead engagement, because then when you ask them for something, it doesn't seem bizarre. It doesn't
Yeah.
seem like cousin Vinny calling because he wants to sleep on your couch. It's
Right.
hey, oh, you've been staying in touch with me for a while. Better yet, when they're ready, they'll call you directly rather than go back to Google and then find 5 competitors. You'll be the one that they call because they're like, oh, well, Daniel kept in touch with me. So
Yeah.
both of those are reasons why this is kind of critical, I think.
Yeah. In fact, you bring up a really good point, Dave, because a lot of our customers think, oh, well, I don't need to do that stuff because my customers are really loyal and I provide an amazing service. So they're just going to call me back. They took a survey a couple of years ago of people that had carpet cleaners come out to their house, and 8 out of 10, so 80%, could not accurately name the name of the company that provided the service 1 week after the service. So you tell me a year from now, or even 6 months from now, or 18 months from now, that they're going to accurately be able to name you. And so guess what they do? They go to Google and say, oh, I think the company was like, if I just see the name, I'm going to recognize it, right? So I'm going to just search carpet cleaning on Google real fast. Well, guess what? If you're not on the first 3 or 4 listings, they're going to not see you and they're going to choose someone else. They're not going to search that hard. Like, they just need their carpet cleaned. And so like maybe they'll search their email and find it, but like, why leave that to chance, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the question is, what does it cost you really? Right. And
yeah,
it's a bit of a tangent from that last question, but
yeah,
when you think about customer acquisition costs, like this is where you're calculating, okay, let's break it down for a second. Customer acquisition cost is a really common metric you need to be tracking in any business. But it's the total cost usually per channel, or you can do it all channels at once. You might do a CAC per lead source or a customer acquisition cost for all of your leads, but it's your entire spend on all acquisition channels. So PPC, if you spend money on SEO, if you're spending money on leads, you're buying portal leads from Angie or Thumbtack, all of that. And then you divide it by the number of the customers that you get, right? Then you say, oh, I spent $20,000 this month on marketing and I got 10 customers. Then my customer acquisition cost is $2,000 a customer. Well, if your service value is $1,800, well, now you know you're underwater, right? You're spending more money to get those customers than you're making on returns. So your ROI is negative. So, but what does it cost to get us, in your carpet cleaning business, Daniel? Do you remember what your cost was to acquire a customer?
I don't, but my brother and I own a concrete coatings company now, and we got that number dialed in. It's like in the 355 range, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we know, to your point, like, hey, if we're spending more than that in acquiring a customer, we're paying too much. If we're spending less, hey, let's dump money on that until it comes back to the 355 mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we know that number.
And it'll vary, guys, like across industries. Sometimes you can do it pretty fast if you know how many leads you're buying from each source before you get a customer. Like,
right.
Hey, 1 in 4 I'm closing. So for that lead source, it's 4 times the average lead cost. That's my customer acquisition cost. But if your service is like carpet cleaning, it's tough because you're not billing a lot for that service.
Your average ticket might be $300. Yeah.
If it's $300, you're toast because your average clean is what, $250?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
yeah, and what's really cool too is like if you market to the customer throughout the life of their lifetime, you increase the customer lifetime value, or how much money they're going to give you throughout, from day one till they stop using you. And so if you can increase that from $1,500, or like Dave said in his example, from $1,800, maybe your CAC is $2,000 and you're at 1,800 customer lifetime value, you're losing money. But if you can acquire customers for 2,000, but you can increase their customer lifetime value to 5,000, now you're looking at an ROI that might be stomachable. So first you spend a whole bunch up front and then you don't spend anything on them because you're spending more on trying to acquire new customers. Whereas if you just spent a little bit of money going forward, you can really make that customer double, triple, quadruple in value for you. So super important. And Dave also mentioned something that's really important, and I could just go for days on this stuff because I'm really passionate about it now. But the timing is really important, right? So it doesn't make sense anymore to go out and say, hey, I'm going to send my whole customer list an email because it's winter time and I'm slow in the winter. Well, what happens when that customer that used you 2 months ago gets that email? And maybe it's a service that you offer that really only makes sense once a year. Now it just seems like Dave said, like it's odd, like what, like that doesn't make sense anymore. But if you put them in a drip sequence that's always returns to ask them that question or reach out to them in 6 months or a year, now it makes sense, right? Because they just bought from you a year ago and you can personalize it and you say, hey, Dave, it's been a year since we were last at your house. I was just looking through our records. Would you like us to get you back on the schedule? Now it's like, oh, Daniel's being super helpful to me. Like he went through his books and reminded me, like, that's amazing. Right. So that feels totally different than just an email blast that doesn't make sense why you sent it.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, doing some basic business math, right, or figuring out patterns with your clients gives you that ability to be proactive. Now, painting homes, this is an example where people are a little sporadic, but 3 to 5 years, I think, is kind of refresh rate on a lot of people who regularly paint their homes. But cleaning, like recurring services, cleaning, window washing, a lot of carpet cleaning, obviously, like these are services where about every 6 to 12 months, on carpet cleaning is what I remember from other folks I've worked with, but window cleaning a couple times a year, home cleaning, often it's monthly, every other month, something like that. Like once you know, like what type of service model your clients fall into, like think of them as buckets, then you can in your database, whatever system you're using, apply tags, track them somehow, attach a field. If you have an old school CRM that's like, old architecture, you got to add a custom field to do something in it, do that, because then you can track what type of service model they're in, and then you reach out to just that group. Otherwise, you might, like Daniel's saying, you're communicating to the guy that has a weekly clean as if he's a twice a year. That's not going to be very productive.
Yeah, people pick up on that really fast. The other thing you can do too is, like, for a painter, for example, it might be every 5 years or is a refresh or whatnot, but like at year 1, follow up with it, or even let's start back further than that. As soon as the service is done, how about an automatic handwritten card or voicemail saying, hey, this is Daniel, the owner of ABC Painting. I just want to let you know, we really appreciate your business. If there's any issues at all, or you see anything you're not happy with, please let us know. Like, we strive to provide amazing service. And they're like, whoa, like, this company is already like top notch because they reaching out instead of me chasing them for something that happened. Now, like a year from now, you could follow up and say, hey, did you know we also provide these other services, power washing, deck staining, fence, like whatever it is that you do. Right. And then now you may have seen that, like, they may actually hire you again. And while you're there, maybe you quote on other services that you see that they need. And then it's maybe you send them a holiday card, right? And then maybe at the 3-year mark, you're like, hey, we're just wanted to let you know we also do interior, last time we did your exterior. And then at the 5 mark, it's like, hey, did you know some customers just have us paint the side of the house that the sun hits, right? Like, helpful messaging. And then maybe at the 7-year mark, it's like, hey, it's been 7 years, the average, like something that plays into that sequence. And so, people think of like painting like, oh, my customers don't need it, so I just, I don't do that. But in reality, it costs you another $10 over 7 years. So like $1.25 a year, and you can get another $10,000 job out of that customer instead of just one job. Right. So double that customer lifetime value for $10 extra. Like, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah. And let me add on to that. And what if you, in that sequence early on, ask them for an online review? Then you ask them for a referral. And then a year and a half later, ask them for another referral. And you keep training your customers that they should be thinking about referring their friends and family to you. So then eventually they're at a dinner party and someone's like, man, I got to get my outside, I'm flaking. I got to get the exterior of my home repainted. They're like, oh, I got a guy, because he just got a text from you 2 weeks ago that said, hey, this is something you ought to be doing. Just want to give you a tip to, make sure you clean off the side of your house and with this chemical so it doesn't get mold. Like in the South, everyone's got that weird mold that grows on the side of their house. I live in the desert, so we don't have that problem.
No mold there. Yeah.
Yeah. In Illinois, though, we had lots of this stuff going down. So that something simple, right? Like tips and tricks and value and thank yous. And then you intermingle that with a couple of referral requests and an online review request. And you'd be surprised how much you can mobilize your customers and nurture them and cross-sell service to them. So, because a lot of times they would all prefer to work with someone they know rather than find a new provider. Most of them just don't know you have 3 or 4 services. They just think of you as, oh, you quoted me to paint my lamppost in the front yard. You must only paint lampposts. Like, for some reason, customers really pigeonhole us when we provide service to them. So that's super good advice, Daniel.
Can I share an amazing ROI story? It's probably one of the best ones we have.
Yeah,
So
please.
we have a exterior cleaner. They do window washing. They're in Los Angeles. They serve a high end customer base, but they sent a ringless voicemail out to 100 customers that hadn't done business in 18 months. And they only did 100 because they just wanted to test this and they didn't want their phone to blow up afterwards. So they sent 100 and 22, they got 22 calls back, and they booked almost $23,000 in work with an average ticket of around $1,000, how it works out. So, and that cost them, I think it was $37 or something like that. So for $37 in marketing to their existing customer base, to people who already know, like, and trust them, and using the tags or like, service dates and things like that, being a little bit smart of who they sent the message to, they generated $22,000. I mean, that's an ROI that I can't even calculate in my head. It's so big, but
yeah,
you have a massive value asset in your business that you just probably aren't using.
Yeah. And neither one of us is mathematicians. So, but it's got a lot of zeros on the end of that ROI.
A lot of zeros. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of zeros. And this is a lot of you guys that might know me and know what we do. Like, this is like the perfect synergy though, right? Because when you want to cut through the clutter, and let's transition to this, Daniel, because it's a lot of folks, they say, well, this sounds cool, but it's a pain in the butt to sit at my desk and write a handwritten note. I actually have a client that they're a home service company, a cleaning company, and they service thousands of people a month, and they were trying to write thank you notes to all of their new clients, which I think is phenomenal, guys. Yeah. This is something that makes you stand out. I worked in another industry at one time, and we won Apple as a company doing some high-end legal translation work because somebody wrote their chief IP officer a handwritten note. So don't underestimate in any industry, like, the value of getting a personal note that appears to be or is handwritten. But let's talk a little bit about cutting through the clutter, because right now emails get overburdened. Texting is super solid. Like we see massive engagement rates there, and yet sometimes it doesn't have the staying power, right? Because I check my texts every few minutes. Not really. I'm not 15, but a lot of Americans every 2 minutes they check their phone. If it buzzes, they check their phone. Almost neurotically. So, but they see it and then they're like, okay, and they file it, and then they're going back to whatever they were. Help us, Daniel, understand a little bit more, like, what's the staying power and the impact of using physical media in addition to digital media to really create synergy?
Yeah. So that's a great point. So mail was the only thing way back when, right? That's how people market it, is just postcard, magazine. Like, your grandparents will probably be like, oh, I saw him in the phone book, right? And it's just you're like, that's so old, grandpa, it doesn't make sense anymore. So then, like, this thing with email came, and all of us read all of our emails, right? It's like, oh, someone emailed me. And most of the emails you were getting were people that you knew. And, it's evolved to the point now where, like, I have a personal Gmail, right? And I have multiple Gmail accounts. And, like, the one that most people have, Gmail has like a promotions filter. So it knows if it's coming from a business, it knows, like, if it's social media emails, and the filters are getting so strong. And then even the stuff that does make it to my inbox, like, I'm only reading it if I know who the person is and I want to, like, communicate with them. Mm-hmm. So, email used to be great at doing this, and it's becoming less and less so. It's still effective, but same thing with text, right? Text is super strong with engagement now, but you're starting to get, like, discussion about consumer protection laws around texting. And it's becoming really important to have people opt in, and people, like, can get a bad taste in your mouth if you're texting. Same thing with voicemail. Voicemail is, like, in that gray area of, like, do I want someone to be calling me to help or not, or texting me? But what's interesting is, like, you think, like, young people, like Gen X, Gen Z, all these people, they're like, oh, they don't want mail anymore. It's the exact opposite. So mail was really popular, and then it took a nosedive with, like, email and, like, electronic media, social media, and it's coming back really strong. Millennials say, like, they want their preferred mode of, like, getting advertising from a company is actually via mail. Mm-hmm. They want to save the postcard for when they need it. when they're in the mind, like a bunch of studies say, like when you're in the mindset of like browsing social media or on your email, it's not really a buyer's mindset. Like you don't stop to buy because that's not what you're doing. People feel like it's disruptive when they're doing on social media. So there's physical mail is making a huge comeback. And I think it was like 70 something % of people said they check their mail every day and they look at every piece that's sent to them. So it just, even if it's a half a second, right? Like your brand's getting in front of someone, whereas like email, there's a really good chance they're never even opening it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that adds to the staying power too, because one of the things, I've got a couple of things on my desk here. I've got a card written from one of my partners, Christian, at a group called Operandi. It's sitting on my desk, like it's still sitting there because he wrote that to me in like, I think early March. So what is that? 7 months later, it's still sitting on my desk. There's something about handwritten notes. The people, they want to hang on to it. It's not just nostalgic, but there's an emotional connection to the media. Where, I mean, I don't know anyone who's printed off one of my text messages and then hung it on their wall. I don't know.
No matter how nice it is, right?
Yeah, if so, they might be kind of a stalker. And anyway, it doesn't matter. But that's not typical, right? But there's an emotional connection to physical media that doesn't exist with multimedia, which I think is important as well. You send a note to somebody, probably going to hang on to that. You send a postcard, it might sit on the counter for a week or so, but they're going to see your logo on their countertop multiple times until they say, I'm going to throw it away or I'm going to call you. So those sorts of things. And then getting into creative media. Tell us, Daniel, a little bit about some of the creative media concepts people can use to leverage the power of physical media in addition to, and synergize it with multimedia, digital media.
Yeah. So we have people running, for example, like the most common thing we see that are people are really successful physical media are they will run a Facebook ad in a particular that's targeted to a particular geography, like a tight geography, like a neighborhood, and say, hey, like we're doing this thing in your neighborhood. And then, they'll send postcards saying like, hey, as seen on your Facebook. And then they'll send like a handwritten card around the actual house they're doing, say, hey, just want to let you know, like we're going to be working at your neighbor's house. We apologize if there's any, like a pardon our dust, they call them, like a pardon our dust card. Hey, we're going to be in the area. Sorry for the trucks and stuff. By the way, if you'd like a free quote, we're offering up $300 off, as because we're inconveniencing you potentially, or the noise or whatever. And it sounds like, they not only do they feel like you're everywhere and they're like, man, this company is legit in their marketing, like they know what they're doing, but also it's like, it's not just like the cheesy normal like offer that you're seeing. It's wow, they're so courteous, they'll give me $300 off, right? Like it feels different when it comes that way. So that's that's super creative. Actually changing the mail to really be specific to like the neighborhood. So putting a picture of the neighborhood fountain or the neighborhood entrance on there and say like, hey, your neighborhood's preferred provider for this. We've done 100 homes in this neighborhood, that type of thing, like really legitimizing that, like, you're not just blasting out 100,000 pieces. You're like, that neighborhood and you work there.
That's like, interesting. Where do you cross the border from embedded and knowing and entrenched to creepy at that point? Is there a line there, an uncanny valley where you don't want to cross?
It's a good question. Yeah, like you'll see some people that there's some capability out there to like actually put the front of the house on the postcard. Like our system can do that. You can actually say, hey, like I want to put the front of their house on this postcard and send it to them. Some companies like get really good success with that. Some people feel like it's creepy. So maybe that's drawing the line. But buying lists, sometimes like people can buy the list of their name and like put their name on it, send a handwritten card that way. Like maybe that's crossing the line, but it just depends on what you're comfortable with, what your service is, and the person receiving it. The reality is like, let's say 2% of people buy something are going to respond to a print marketing ad, which is a high percentage, by the way. Like if 50% of people see that find it creepy, like you're already not going to sell to 70% anyways. So like you've lost 50%. Who cares? Like if that brings your 2% to a 3%, right? Like if you really want to be a hardcore marketer, that's how they think. Like they they realize like, just like a political ad, and you're like, well, I'd never say that on TV, right? But they're only trying to appeal to a small percentage of people, and they know who that is, and they know how to get a response out of them. So
yeah. In that case, never mind. Let's not talk about politics.
Yeah, let's not go down that path.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a bad topic to go down. Other podcast for another time. So let's talk through Daniel, because one thing I want to do is maybe outline what is the cradle to grave potential of using true like blended media engagement. And I'll start, but I'd please interject, because I was just thinking, like, when you talk about lead engagement, right? There are ways where you can start to, certain people, they'll engage certain things, but let's say you've got new inbound leads. What would you say, on our end, obviously you want, if it's digital, you want to text them and email them and call them, engage with video content when you email. That's the only way to do it. With self-scheduling tools, you just use Calendly if you need to, or use a scheduling link or whatever. So you want to give them action that they can do. If it's inbound, they want you. So be assertive when you're engaging with them. And then, but after the initial engagement, right? And then sequencing, follow-up text the next day, call the next day, call, maybe a secondary call the first day if it's earlier in the morning. At that point, you start to pivot a little bit and get into like what I would call nurturing, where you're like, okay, I'm still trying to get you scheduled, but I also want to remind you why you reached out to me. I want to give you value and take, and give, take, right? Yes. You want to start creating that model. How on initial lead engagement have you seen people use physical media, voicemail drops, the types of things you guys offer to augment kind of the digital media engagement strategies?
Yes. So to your point, it starts even before they're a customer, right? In that whole customer journey. You mentioned all the ones that I would say digitally, and then some people will use the voicemail. Hey, I just want to say thank you. We saw you submit a lead on our website. One of our salespeople will be reaching out within the next 24 hours. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I missed you, but you're a valued customer to us, and blah, blah, blah. Right. Yeah. My concrete coatings company, we actually follow up with every quote that we go on with a handwritten card. Mm-hmm. So if they don't close on site right there, they're getting a handwritten card. And it just says something along the lines of like, hey, thank you so much for the opportunity to work with you, or to quote your business. This is why we're different than others. And, we'd love the opportunity to continue the relationship. Something like that, right? It sets you apart so far, because what contractor is doing that? So now the value of that is, not only does it it increased our close rate almost 10%. And when you're talking about an average ticket of $4,000, you do 100 quotes a month, and you close an extra 10, that's an extra 40 grand in revenue, right? So like amazing ROI there. But starting that early, you can really set yourself apart, and you can even charge more, right? Like when you're doing those things, if you're priced similarly to someone else, like you're going to obviously get the work. But if you're priced 10% higher, people are like, I don't care. Like the last contractor I hired didn't show up. So like this, like I want to work with them. If they're an extra $100, like no brainer. So it starts there, and then it's immediately after. We call it the thank you follow-up sequence, but it's thanking them for their business. However you want to do that, whether it's in a text or an email and then it's asking for a review, or asking them, how did we do? And then, following up in a couple of months. It really depends on the service, but following up in a little bit to say, here's other things that we offer. Following up, again, with some value, sprinkling in the value. And then depending on when that service should be bought again, going again and saying, hey, it's about time. Like we noticed, we went through our schedule, and it's about time that we come back out. So that you're hitting them at the right time, you're offering value, and you've already built that relationship up front that, hey, this company just really cares about me.
Yeah, I love that. And the cadence, I mean, we could speak for a long time about cadence and sequencing, right? Because we got to keep in mind customer expectations as we build these things out. You hit on the three big ones, Daniel, that I think everyone needs to be paying attention to. And most people only pay attention to the first one, which kills me, but is lead follow-up. And we've hammered that one quite a bit. Quote follow-up. A lot of folks, they throw out quotes like they're the parade tossing Smarties, right? And they're like, here's a quote, here's a quote, here's a quote, and they're not valuing their staff time, nor are they actually investing the extra 3% effort or maybe 0% effort just using a tool right? To then effectively follow up on that lead. I've seen people with similar results. Handwritten notes are super powerful, man. But even if you just follow up with a text and follow up with an email, and you follow up with something, but follow up with a text and a handwritten note and then an email and then a phone call, like you've made yourself completely stand alone in a very crowded industry of painters or roofers or whoever you're with. And you're 100% right. They are so fed up. I'm fed up. I had to call like 5 people, and I pretty much had to like grab someone by the collar to get them to give me a quote on my deck. And then don't even get me started about getting a rock wall in the backyard. That was a nightmare, dude. Trying to get people. I had a guy show up. He agreed to a price, and he showed up and he looked at it. He's like, I don't know. And he left. And he'd already agreed to do the job. I'm like,
isn't that crazy?
People. Yeah. So I would have gladly at that point paid him an extra $500 just to stay and do the job.
Yeah.
But instead, I went back to square one, found somebody else, and went through the bidding process again. It was painful, man. So homeowners, they feel that, and they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm honestly dreading the next time I need a contractor to come over, because, and I love contractors, they're my clients, but around here, they're just so bad at following up on quotes. Here's your quote, and then they're gone, and they won't even respond to calls after they call me. I'm like, bro, I want to write you a check, please.
Right. And see, they're leaving a ton of money on the table because their answer is going to be, well, Dave, I'm so busy, I can't even do enough work, I can't get the employees. And it's like, well, what if you charge like 40% more than anyone else, but you have this simple follow-up sequence that costs you $5, right? And you could pay your employees double what anyone else is paying them, and you would make more profit and you'd still do the same number of jobs. But they don't realize that like they have this like mental barrier to say like, I can only charge this much for my service because that's what other people are charging. When the reality is people like you and me, like we'll pay a 30% premium or a 20% premium on a really high ticket because we don't have time to mess around with like, are they going to show up? Are they insured? Are they going to finish the job? Like if you just give them that confidence, like with a following up properly, like they already be like, man, this contractor is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which then, if we lead into the third phase of client engagement, post-service delivery, right? Obviously, you got to do a good job on site, but I think most people are pretty good about that. Not everybody. Some people, no, they're not showing up in uniforms. They're folks who are like flicking, cigarettes in the flower gardens. Like some people just, they don't have it put together, but most businesses do. Yeah. And so assuming you deliver a good service, which most people can, then it's about how do I engage that person afterward? And this is where most people fall on their face. They're like, hey, thanks. Oh, here's a business card that's got if you want to give us a review, just, take that. And the homeowner's like, okay, thanks. Like, what's that? You know what I'm talking about. And people are like, no, I give everyone a card. I talk to people about that because there are 2 things that you should be doing every time. 3, actually. We've already talked about 2 of them. You should always get a review every time you can. A positive review from people who have had a good experience. And you should also be asking everyone for a referral at some point down that flow. And the third thing you should be doing, you should always be thanking them first before you do any of this stuff. But then the third thing is you should be following up and cross-selling services at some point. If you only have one service and you do it great, then maybe you just remind them about your service every now and then. But most people have more than one service. They usually have 3 to 5. And so they bought one. Now you want to educate them about 2, 3, 4, and 5, not all at the same time, but casually. Hey, did you know? Or hey, a lot of our clients, love finding out that we can do tree removal as well as gutter cleaning and blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, this is perfect. I need that done. Or my cousin needs it done.
Absolutely. And to add to that, like if you only have 1 or 2 services, like there's a reason most have 3 to 5, because if you already have this really valuable asset and you can sell them something else, it's like building a second business without having to pay to acquire all these customers, which is the most difficult part about building a business. So if you don't have that, like our product, as well as these other digital products, are amazing ways to get in front of people about, what you do.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about, let's say you've already shared a little bit about lead engagement and also the post quote follow-up sequence. I love that blend of sending out a handwritten note. That's genius. And the reality is the cost is what, like, I don't know, $1 or something like that.
Bucks, yeah.
Yeah. A couple of bucks. If your service is more than a couple $100, totally worth it to increase that close rate by 10%. But what about after a sell? Can you walk us through some effective examples of like, how should somebody be using blended media, physical media, to follow up with customers post-service?
Yeah, I think it's really just starting with that thank you. Again, depending on your average ticket, it can be as simple as a voicemail that's, a few pennies, and say, hey, this is Daniel. I'm the owner of ABC Window Cleaning. I just want to let you know I wasn't on the job site yesterday, but I really value your business, and I hope everything went perfect. But if it didn't, just let us know. This is my office number, and I'd be more than happy to take care of that. If you did have a great experience, please, click that review link that we sent you, and I hope you have a great day. Right? Something that simple just changes the total feeling of like, this is transactional to like, no, Daniel's company really cares about me. So I think starting there, and then again, just like going back to the, hey, here's value add, which can actually be selling, of like, did you know that, the average home has blah, 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 and we offer this service that helps with that. Did you know, like, that we do this as well? And if you combine these two services, we can actually do it for much less expensive. Like, all those things are just, if you can couch it in a way that's adding value to the customer along the line after sale, and then asking for the reviews and the referrals. Yeah, it's huge. Like, it's huge. Half our concrete coating. So I talked to you about our cost of customer acquisition is $350. Half of our customers that we acquire are through referral. So, that's $350 times, 2 jobs a day. If half of that's a lot, $350 a day, like, that adds up throughout the year. So that's the value of a referral in my business. But in some businesses, it's way more than that.
Yeah, it's true. Well, and the crazy thing is that most people don't even ask for them. Most people don't. Like, our business is driven by referrals. I was at a conference and I probably got 5 referrals. I had people bringing people over. You got to talk to Dave. You got to talk to Dave. And I love it. Part of that's just what we're talking about. You take good care of people. You're honest, good reputation, blah, blah, blah. But you can't underestimate the value of that. Now I want to change topics. Let's talk about brownies for a minute. Or let's talk about creative, because we mostly talked about like postcards, handwritten notes. What are some ways people are using that creative media as part of this blend? And how would you recommend that people start thinking about that differently? Because I think we get cards. I get my DMV notice every year. It's sitting on my desk. Like, I need to, renew my car. How can you use something more enticing or exciting or interesting that still provides a lot of value in using in a media campaign?
Yeah. So we don't, I'm not a creative, I should start by saying. So I'm a bad person to speak about this, but we've seen things that are really cool with like the language of like, remember that sweet feeling when you got when we did this at your house? Like, I hope you get that again with this box of brownies that, we're sending to you, type of thing. So something that is just out of the ordinary, different, creative, right? Like, companies build their entire brand on these like little cheeky sayings, right? And it's like, you can do that with the power of automation and the power of a tool like ours, where it's like, you can automatically send brownies to every customer that's over $500 or whatever that threshold is for you. Soon we're going to be adding, knock on wood, I should never say this in software because how development goes, but we're going to be adding like logoed gifts. So like, coffee mugs. Like, what if your coffee mug had a thing on it and you had a note in there that was creative, right? Like, and the really crazy thing about coffee mugs, the average coffee mug that's branded stays in someone's kitchen for 7 years. So incredible, but right, someone doesn't like, they'll throw away like, to your point, a postcard or a card, but like, they don't want to throw away a coffee mug, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't donate it, so they hold on to it, and can be really effective. So again, I'm not a creative, but I've seen some really creative stuff out there along those lines.
Yeah, I've got I got a couple of clients that I went to a golf event with. Well, I got to share 2 stories. One's something I did. One's what a client does. I'll share the client one first, because they're a painting company. They do high-end work. They do great work. And they at the end of every job, the general manager or the salesperson, somebody, the franchise owner, buys a key lime pie, and they drive to the house and they deliver this key lime pie with a thank you note to the owner every single time. And where some painters are doing, let's say 10 to 12 jobs a month, they might be doing 4 to 5 at almost the same revenue, because they're doing bigger projects, higher end stuff. And yet the impact of that, have you ever had somebody come back to your house after you spent money with them and they gave you a freaking pie before?
No.
Never. never once. And it's a key lime pie, which makes it even better. And it fits in with their branding. It's really a cool move. But I've always been really impressed by that because one of their core values is love, right? And excellence is another one of their core values. And I think that they're illustrating that by the gift that they give. But there's something unique that happens emotionally and chemically when you give someone a gift, and also when it's a gift they can consume. Like we give out, we work with the Utah Truffle Company. One of the family members has this private labeling of the truffles business. It's awesome. We give people, it's, a branded chocolate truffle at a conference. It's got our logo on it. And then people open it up and eat it. And they're like, oh, wow. Like I just had an experience with your brand and I didn't realize I was going to have chocolate. Right. So,
and you bring up something else there too, is the like some good business advice someone gave me a long time ago is like, if you're having trouble like making a decision, like you should always make a decision based on like, ask yourself what you would do if you're going to own this business for 100 years and money wasn't an object, right? Like think long term. And so when I think that way, and you say like, well, I'm going to give a key lime pie to someone that cost me $25 once I got to drive it there, and they're not going to buy service again for 10 years, right? So like if you think short term, you say, no, that doesn't make sense. But if you say, I'm going to own this business for 100 years and pass it on to my kids, and they're going to pass it on to their kids, and money isn't an object, does it make sense to give a pie? And then of course, the answer is, of course, it makes sense. So then you start backing that up, right? And you're like, well, if I'm going to own this business for 10 years, which most people, like if they start a business, they think they will. And like, does $22 in like 10 years, like, does it make sense? Like it becomes a lot easier to think of like, invest like it's a long-term thing, right? Not just like, well, how does that affect my P&L this month?
Right. Yeah. I call it the Wall Street mentality, the ladder. You're like, oh, well, I mean, we're cost margin. You start panicking and thinking about a cash accounting outfit. And but if you look at the actual ROI of that spend, I just put some money down and I spent the time. The time's probably more expensive than the pie.
Yeah.
I took my guy off the street of doing an estimate to go to give a customer a pie, but you're 100% right. And I doubt it's 10 years in that space. Yeah. A lot of folks, if you're doing high-end jobs, they've got another house somewhere. They've got another project somewhere. They've got, they've always got something more they want done.
Yes.
Think about our dang house. And like all the time, I'm like, oh, working on a project in the basement. Oh, I'm working on this project over here. Like it doesn't really ever end.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm sure, and I don't even know if I'm one of his target clients, but I think the whole concept of thinking long-term in the business relationship with a client is golden. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Long-term. And then just like the impact of two people try to think of like, well, they're probably not going to use me again, or they're not going to refer me, but it only takes one, right? Like if your average ticket is for a painter is $10,000, like it only takes one every so often to make it a great ROI.
Yeah. You got to send out, what is that? 400 pies with no success before the ROI is not good, right?
There's not a chance that happens.
Not a chance in heck. No way. Unless they're terrible pies. I guess that might be a deterrent. Yeah, be careful about that. Also, true story though. Like you don't want to be giving out garbage. Like when I go to trade shows and people are like, here's some dumb widget. I'm like, put your dumb widget in your own pocket. I'm not putting it in my bag. So, but if you show up to someone's house and you give them like a McDonald's French fry, that's not going to really be an impressive or a good memorable experience. It'll be memorable, just not a good memorable experience. Nothing against McDonald's, just like a cold McDonald's fry, like you could chisel wood with that thing. So don't give that away. Cool. Hey, so give us some other, like, I would love some funny, I'm sure you've seen some really creative and fun things that people have done. Give us a couple of examples as we're kind of winding down now, like with strategy. I think we've pounded the strategy. I think everybody gets it, right? Like this is critical to success, to be engaging across multiple channels. What are some fun creative ideas? Maybe best and worst. Have you seen some really terrible things with physical media?
And I've seen terrible things. I saw postcards go out without a phone number on them or a website. It's like, hey, call me for window cleaning. You're like, can't even call you, man. Like, so that's bad. And that's probably not the only time I've seen that. But I've seen stuff that's really creative. Like we used to send out like $1 bills, crisp $1 bills, until it was hard for us to kind of scale that. Like it was difficult to get them. But we used to let people send them out, and they'd have all kinds of unique sayings like, hey, I hope our relationship's worth more than this than a buck or something. But, you know, and they would, like I said, I'm not creative, but I saw all kinds of funny ones through the years of just, you know, really think of something unique. The copy is super important too. It's not about just like what you send, but just like the copy, and like you were talking about the pie, like how it plays in with your brand, and do things professionally is like a huge piece of advice. Like if you're going to do it right. To your point of like sending a cold McDonald's French fry, it's like, I'm going to spend $1,000 sending these things, but like I didn't have someone think about the copy or make sure it's all spelled right, or a graphic designer like do it professionally, right? And it's like, you want them to spend $5,000 with your company, and this is what the postcard looks like. Like, God, no, they're not going to let you paint their house. Like, if you think this looks good, like, you know, so like people just don't think of that. They're like, well, it's just a postcard. Like they get the idea, and it's like, no, it all, like you said, they have a brand experience with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's funny, but really important. And I think if I remember right, you guys offer some design services too on the back end, probably because you've learned that we can't trust our people to do their own design work sometimes.
Yeah, we were actually referring it all out, and just people were having poor experiences. And so we said, hey, we don't want to make money on this, but we want people to have good design and have a good ROI. That was the purpose. And they need a professional design to do that. So we just said, hey, if we can just charge cost and make sure they get a better ROI, they're going to stay with us longer. And what we found is, we initially started thinking like, this is going to be a cost for us. We're not going to be able to keep our designer busy. People have their own designers. And what we found is we offered the service for, you know, the reasonable price. And like now we just had a meeting today about like, how do we bring on another designer that's just as capable and has really good copy, because we're swamped. Like we literally, we turned the spigot off. We couldn't take any more orders. And so it's a great thing, and it's a need for our customers. But all of that says, yes, there's like a huge demand for people that do things professionally, even in design.
Yeah. Amen. We've seen the same on our end with like text, email, copy.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because marketers, and I love marketers, right? We all work with smart ones. Tons of them are my partners, but marketing copy is different than sales engagement copy. It's totally different. And so the marketers want to slam brand everywhere. And they want to infuse their brand messaging and their core values into a simple sentence. Rather than saying, are you going to the park? They say, because we're transparent with our neighbors and we value and the reward we feel is I would like to go to the park on Thursday. How about you? Right? Yeah. Where sales copy is like, hey, you going to the park? When are you going to go? You know, like it's conversational. And so we've had the same experience where we used to outsource a bit, and on the copy, we used to trust people to get it done. It would slow them down. They weren't quite sure what to do. Then they would spit something out, and I was like, oh no, you just automated something that makes you look dumb. Like that has typos everywhere. Or where'd you get that image? You can't send an image of like a copyrighted image in this tech test. Like it's just random stuff. I'm sure you guys run into that all the time. Like, get that image. Wait, that's from my own website. You can't use that. You know, it's funny. So I'm glad you're doing that. And you know, the phone number missing from a flyer, I've seen it before. I did it once before on an email campaign where I was like, hey, you guys should, you know, engage, blah, blah, blah. And then someone was like, how do I do that? I was like,
Speaking of one of the worst, here's a story. We had someone in Florida send a picture, a copyrighted image of a Disney character on their postcard. And somebody at Disney got it and basically, thankfully, didn't have an attorney or anything, but reached out to us because they saw our like mail indicia on there, and they basically said, hey, you guys realize you can't send this, right? And I'm like, yeah. We reached out to the customer and like, hey, you can't send copyrighted images, like you're gonna get sued. Like, oh my gosh.
Disney's got deep pockets, but they know you're not worth their time, so don't do that again. How fun, man. So guys, everyone listening, if we'll do an episode on copyright law if we need to, but that's good advice. Daniel, any other advice you give folks as we wrap up here on just seeing how to engage, how to maximize ROI using assets like your own customer list?
Yeah. So I would start with just like, if you don't, you know, if you're using Dave's product with Client Tether or some other product, if you use my product or something else, like just figure out a way to do this, even if it's it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Start with just the simplest thing. Start with saying thank you. Like if you're not automating thank yous, start with that. If you're not even going to automate that, like start with just saying thank you to your best customers. But start somewhere and like have a vision of like where you want to get to, and just make it a point of each quarter, I'm going to do the next thing, right? So I'm going to start by saying thank yous. And then the quarter after that, I'm going to follow up with leads, with quotes. And then the quarter after that, I'm going to start following up with people that have done business in a year, right? And like, you don't have to like think about this as like, this is way overwhelming. I don't like the word automation scary, which by the way, I think Dave's tool and our team and his team together, like we can figure out automation if you don't even know how to turn on your computer, but we'll do that for you. But don't think of it as this big scary task. Just start somewhere and just say, I know that saying thank you is like beneficial to me, and just start with that. And then take the next step after.
Yeah, love it. That's great advice, because you're right, it can be intimidating.
Yeah.
I have people tell me that sometimes, and I say, let's like take one bite before you try to swallow the elephant, right? Like let's take care of one thing at a time. Don't waste money on leads and not follow up effectively. That's usually where I recommend people start, and then we start diving into, okay, now your next piece that's more urgent is following up on your quotes. Now let's follow up on your old dead leads. Now let's follow up on your clients, right? Like it's that you can create a very easy sequence which is digestible, and we're moving into the slow season for most industries, right? Where they've got time at the end of the year to be pensive, to think through what they've got, their assets and their strategies. So if you haven't already blocked off time around the holidays to do things like this, man, reach out to Daniel or myself on LinkedIn. We can probably spend 15 to 20 minutes with you and give you some great advice that will get you going. And happy to do so.
Yeah, if you're using a CRM and you have a slow spot in your schedule and you want it full, reach out. And you have customers, we guarantee we can fill that schedule for you, and we'll talk about how we can do that. So just let us know, SendJim.com, and start a chat with us.
Yeah, fantastic. Daniel, thanks for coming. This is great advice. Look forward to doing another one of these with you soon.
Yeah, same to you, Dave. Thanks for having me. Have a great week.
You too. See you, Daniel.